G'day, today we're going to drain the pond. There's old fuel in the fuel tank. And we're going to clean the petcock. Next job is to drain some of this fuel in this fuel tank. And to do that, I have released this fuel line. It's a little bit stripping in it at the moment from that side of the fuel pump. And released a couple of those removable cable ties that fired it up there, which makes it easy because I don't have to release the other end of it. And now I'm bringing that down, and this petcock is in the on position, but nothing's happening. I think that's because it's not getting the pulses from the engine. I'm going to turn that to the prime position, and you can now see there's a good flow coming through there. I think that's what prime's about for some reason. I don't fully understand. I think the pulse line on the petcock actually is mainly there for shutting the fuel off when the engine's not running. And I've drained this much fuel out of the tank so far, and I've got another ice cream container ready to go now, because there's more than 2 litres in there by the look of it. So I'll swap over. Alright, I'm going to remove this thermatic fan again. But this time I'm also going to remove the bracket that it's supported on, which involves a nut down here, which is one of the 2 holding this foot peg on, and also a nut and a bolt through here, because I really only need to remove this mesh shield thing, but I don't seem to be able to get it to move over that bolt section. So it's a bit of a series of things needing to be done, and then that will give me clearer access to the screws up into the petcock. So 3 things I've got to do before I can get the job done. I've removed quite a bit of gear from under the front of the motor here. The thermatic fan, the supports for the thermatic fan, the grill that was in front of the thermatic fan, and then going backwards, the whole foot pedal assembly has been removed. This exhaust bracket bolts onto one of the bolts on this side that the assembly goes across. This is the other one. This is the cable. This is the cable to the rear wheel. This is the handbrake cable to the left-hand handlebar, and that's a return spring that I shouldn't lose. I'll take it with me now. And the bearing that rear brake pedal pivots on had a screw through it, and O-rings and lock nuts, and because it's a brake component, like you see here and here, there's cotter pins as backups if things fail. So there was a cotter pin on the back here beyond a nut. So look, that's given me a lot of room there. Part of the reason I removed this gear is so that I can clean it. You can see these bits of dirt here were up here, and that got missed by the pressure wash, and in those crevices around there, you know, it just sits there and helps potentially corrode in those areas. Moving around the bike, same scenario on this side. There was dirt up underneath the pedal. While I'm talking about the pedal assembly, it's all of this. This top is actually the right hand side, and that bottom area and the lever, that's the gear shift lever. The rear brake lever has been taken off completely and is up on the bench. Now that whole assembly has got rust, and I will clean it and give it a shot of paint before I put it back on. And same here with dirt up underneath. That's the two bolts that pedal assembly on. This is the gear shift cable, and as you can see there, everything is out of the way. That's the fuel line hanging down from the input side of the fuel pump, and now the petcock has got its vacuum hose off there, came off this side. The output side is that one pointing upwards. And next I'm going to remove the petcock. There's two Phillips head screws into the bottom of the tank. So there's a little bit more fuel running out of this bottom of the fuel tank. But those Phillips head screws undid easily, and I'm just dropping them out there while I'm trying to hold the phone with petrol all over my hands. But there we go. Now they're the straws I was talking about on top of the petcock. I'm going to drop that whole lot in the tub there, including the screw and the other screw. And now we've got the location where the petcock bolts on. There's effectively two screw holes and two straw holes, I'd call them, there where the petcock bolts up. And now I'm going to go and see what else is inside the tank. The idea with these straws on top of the petcock is this one here is the main straw that fuel's drawn from when you've just got the petcock on. And when the fuel, which starts up here, gets down to this level, you actually run out of fuel when you've just got it switched on. You then have more fuel if you switch over to the reserve position, where it sucks out of this straw. You can see this filtering grid right down to the bottom there, and on this one there's just filtering grid from there to there. So that's the reason there's two straws. So if you're running along on your bike and it runs out of fuel, you can don't panic. You've got some more in the reserve. If you run your bike all the time with the petcock switched to reserve, when you run out you'll have none. So I mean, that's just a simple no-brainer. Run it in the on position. Now the prime position, which is out this way, as I understand it, allows fuel to come through. No fuel runs through either of these if the engine's not running, because the vacuum operated valve on the rear, and some call it a pump, and it may have some pumping effect, but it doesn't let fuel get through to the engine if the engine's not running. That's why there's no actual off position on this switch, on this petcock. There's on, straight down, prime out this way, and reserve when the long end is pointing upwards. Now, prime allows fuel to come through, and I think from my experiment before, it allows fuel to come through from the reserve straw, because when we got very low, it did still allow fuel to come down. And so that's how the petcock works. It's different to the one on my other bike, which was just on and reserve. It also had two straws on it, but it didn't have the vacuum operation, and it had an off position. And so I made a point of always turning the fuel off when I left the bike, because if your needle and seat valve in the carburetor fail, you don't want all your petrol running through. I've made up a mop, I'd call it, on the end of a stick that I can drop down inside the fuel tank and fish around a bit. And when I pull that out, it really doesn't look particularly dirty. It's got a little bit of a mark on the end of it, but I'm not seeing loads of rust or particles in the fuel that's in the tank. I think the main thing is we just need to get rid of that fuel. And I think I've got most of it out. There's a bit of a drivel left in the bottom, which I've done enough wiping around and checking. If I look with a torch down the sides inside the fuel tank, it looks brand new. So I think that's enough worrying about the fuel tank. We'll put the petcock back on and fill it up with some fresh fuel and connect up the hoses. Okay, that's the new petcock, or the old petcock, cleaned up and refitted. The hose leading up to the fuel pump threaded through those couple of ties, heads in behind the fuel pump and goes in that end, and the line of the carburetor comes out this side. So I'm ready to put some fuel in. I've got a churn of fuel we used to use with our motor racing, and they're fairly easy to pour. I think I can pour into that fuel cap if I'm careful without a funnel. So that's what I'm going to do next. It started first time and is running sweet. Have a listen. That's music to my ears. Get out to your shed and have some fun yourself.